Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, we actually have 3 questions from a listener. The first time ever. That's partly because one is super short, but also because, we're getting good feedback on these questions from a listener, and we want to make sure, so we want to get answers out to you guys. So you'll have a question from a student. We always prioritize our students. Student wants to know, if my sister was denied at a school, is it going to hurt me if I apply the next year? Especially if it's a highly selective school. And then several of you have asked us about landscape. So Susan and I will answer a question. What is landscape and how do colleges use it? Lisa will be the one that will answer the question about what do I do if I'm applying to a school that my sister rejected the year before. And then Lisa is back for another question from a listener who wants to know, how do I know if a school has good career incomes? And how do I know if a school is financially stable? So those will be our 3 questions from a listener we'll have today. And then we have a brand new interview I'm super pumped and jazzed about. It's with Carlynn Greene, a.k.a. the Scholarship Guru. And we'll be doing a deep dive over the next 4 weeks on how to win external or outside scholarships. You're going to want to listen to this one. Then we'll have the final part of the college spotlight I did with Lisa on the University of South Carolina. Listen and enjoy. Friends, few announcements. First of all, I'm completely technically incompetent. For example, we had a fantastic webinar. Thank you everyone who came and who participated, Paying for College, a few days ago. But I didn't set up reminders. I was sitting there before the meeting with Matt Carpenter. Actually, it was Jennifer, one of our members of our team. She's not on the podcast, but she's one of our team members and counselors. And she said, I didn't get a reminder. So I'm sitting there talking with Matt Carpenter. And I said, I don't think I set reminders up. He said, oh, my goodness. We used to do webinars without reminders. And all these people would sign up and no one would show. And then I'll never forget this word. I'll never forget it. He says, reminders are mission critical. So thankfully, Linda has gone in and set up all reminders for all the rest of our webinars. So yeah, because we had 168 that confirmed and 74 showed up. So anyway, I'm technically incompetent. Also, I'm technically incompetent because I mentioned to you that our 3 California receptions would be up to meet co-hosts. And listeners got back to me right away about the Santa Monica one with the tech issues. And I was like, oh, snap, what did I do wrong? Linda to the rescue again. She bailed me out. So my understanding is the Santa Monica one is up. In fact, I've already had someone confirm it worked really smoothly. The Redwood City one should be up. So Santa Monica's on September 22nd, 1:30 to 4. That's a Sunday. Redwood City is September 19th, 5 to 7, Northern California. And you may remember, if you're regular listeners, I said, hey, counselor, whoever you are, I can't find your text. You agreed to host us in San Diego. Well, fortunately, the counselor listens to every episode, so we're so blessed. So she got back to me right away. Everything is all set for that gathering in San Diego, and that's up on our website as well. That is on the 12th of September. But guess what? In the interim, Sylvia Borgo, one of our co-hosts who lives in San Diego, said, I'd be willing to do one as well. And here's the thing. The one on the 12th, I already know that there's a pretty big group coming to that. So I was a little concerned we were going to run out of space right away. So we're doing 2 in San Diego right now. So September 11th and September 12th. Those of you in Southern California, you have 2 choices. All of these events are first come, first serve. We would love to see you there. Some of them have more program, like more of a presentation, Q&A and mingling. Some of them are just social and mingling. I'm going to be at all of them. Vince and Susan will join me for the Santa Monica one, and Sylvia will be at the one on September 11th. So please go to yourcollegeboundkid.com/events and sign up if you live anywhere remotely close. We'd love to see you. You know, I love California so much that I literally bought a puzzle on Amazon in California. That's how jazzed I am about this trip. So yeah, in my downtime, I'll be doing my California puzzle. I'm counting the days down. All right. I think we got a great episode for you guys today. I'll transition to the first question with Lisa from Will, a student from North Georgia.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Lisa, I'm in a great mood. You know why?
Why?
We have a question from a student. You know, I love that.
I know. This is very exciting.
Students go to the top of the line.
So absolutely, as they should.
Yep. So we're going to play this question and chime in with your thoughts.
All right. And this is from Will from North Georgia.
Hi, my name is Will. I'm calling from North Georgia. I'm a rising senior and I plan to apply to schools my sister applied to and was accepted to last year. One of them has a 10% acceptance rate. This is also my first choice school. She decided not to accept the spot because she got a full ride scholarship at another school. My question is, should I reach out to the admissions rep for that school and explain why she didn't take the spot? Is this going to affect my application that she didn't take the offer? She had reached out to the admissions rep during her process and met her at a college fair as well. Thank you. My mom has been listening to you for 2 years and she tells everyone about your podcast. She loves you guys. Thank you.
Well, I guess my short answer is no. You don't need to worry about this, Will. And I certainly wouldn't, make a big effort about calling attention to the fact that they didn't yield your sister. But I'm pretty sure you'll get a very independent review process. And, schools expect that kids are not always going to attend.
Yeah, I'd agree 100% with everything you said. And first of all, Will, thank you for your question. And Will's mom, we love it that you love us for 2 years and keep spreading the word. We appreciate that. Admission officers are trained not to judge around this kind of thing. And you know what? It's funny. I was thinking about this question, Lisa, and I had a flashback to this family I worked with when I was doing admissions on the boarding school side. And it was a family from Michigan. The brother had come through, and I really liked him a lot. I liked the family a lot, and Kalamazoo actually. And he didn't end up coming. And I'm competitive, so like when I work something hard, especially my territory, like you kind of take those losses. You're a little disappointed. So then the sister came back the next year, and the reaction is I was like encouraged almost. Like in some ways, it's almost a positive because the way admission officers, if anything, it's a non-factor, or they're going to look at it like, well, if it would have been really bad, you wouldn't have been back here.
Right. It's just, they probably understand money and scholarships and things like that can be a factor.
Yeah. And at the time you're doing admissions, because they see so many applications, like I'm sure she's not even thinking about like, I'm saying she only because most admission officers are women, but could be a he, but whoever person you're working with, like they're probably not remembering the reason why the person didn't come. They may not even, they may not have recollection of it at all. But the point is the fact that you're back, they're trained to judge independently. And if anything, it's a positive because if it had been a bad experience, why would you be back? And I agree with everything you said. I wouldn't make a big deal out of it. I wouldn't do that outreach for lots of reasons. One, you don't want to come off, I'm not saying whiny, but whiny's not the right word, but excuse me, I'm trying to come up with a clever word. I don't want to be defined as that. I don't want to be known as, the kid whose sister didn't come and they reached out to me because they were worried about it. Like, I don't want you to be seen through that prism. So just leave it alone. Let it be known that it's a compliment that you're back. Now, if it was a really natural situation, so let's say you take this whole situation and let's say, I doubt this would happen, by the way, because with 10% admit rates, they tend to be super busy at college fairs. Those are the places where people tend to flock to. But let's say you're at a college fair and you were talking to a rep, and and not first word out of your mouth, but you're having a decent conversation with them, and then they said, so, and you said, hey, I'm definitely applying. And they said, so, college admission, I was interested in your why, right? So like, why? Hey, why are you interested? Wouldn't be wrong to say, well, my sister actually looked at it last year and I learned a lot. Either I was on the tour with her and I loved it, or she actually said great things to me about this school. And it just turned out she got a great scholarship somewhere else. Like, I'm not saying if it was a totally natural context that would work against you. Nothing would be wrong with that, but I would not proactively try to create that, nor would I expect that situation would happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we said all we need to say on this one. I can't think of anything else. And you know me, I'm a chatterbox. If I can't think of something.
I can't believe we got that done in under 5
Wow.
minutes. That's a record.
That is a record. All right. Good luck, Will, in North Georgia.
Yeah, I hope everything works out.
It's my neighbor, and Atlanta's considered North Georgia. I mean, people tend to think of it as, more pushing Tennessee or getting more into the mountains area, or maybe like Forsyth, Cherokee County, Rome or Cartersville or Dahlonega or Helen, or basically in the mountain region, kind of getting up that way outside of Atlanta Metro. But Atlanta Metro is considered North Georgia. So
well, now I know.
Maybe it's Atlanta. I never know. Hey, neighbor.
You never know.
All right. Thank you. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good, good, good. So we have a question that came in about landscape. I'll play the question and then love to get your thoughts. We talk about it a lot on here, and I think some of our listeners are wondering, what are you guys talking about? So,
hi, Mark and team. This is Lindsay, a college and career counselor at a public high school in California. You regularly talk about college admission counselors evaluating students in the context of their school, and you've mentioned landscape as a tool that they use to do this. Having never personally seen landscape, I'm curious to know how detailed it is. For example, I work at a school that has both incredibly well-resourced students and students who are significantly low income. Are college admission counselors able to see which students fall into which camp for the purpose of evaluating their GPAs and test scores? Knowing the answer to this question will help my team as we update our school profile in August. Thanks so much for all you do to help families and counselors alike.
Mark, this is a fascinating topic because I find that the College Board landscape tool is a bit of a mystery to the public. And I think it is that way because College Board has made that so.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one of Lindsay's questions was, how can schools become aware of the landscape information that's being communicated to colleges about their high school? And the original intent, and I am going to go back in history a little bit, but the original intent was that it would be.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not able to find any evidence that has happened. So any of you listeners out there on the high school side, if you are aware of this, and Julia, I know you're out there listening too, being in a school, maybe you can help me, but I have not been aware of this information being released. Although I actually have an article from around 2020 saying this year we will work with our district and high school members on an approach to share landscape information with high schools and families. Starting next year, high schools and students and parents with a College Board account will be able to access the same high school and neighborhood information that colleges will see in their landscape resource. So, Lindsay, log into your College Board account there, or have a couple of your students do it and let us know, because I sure couldn't find that access. And it may be that was a delay. There were a lot of changes to this tool since 2020. So let me start. That's the big question in my mind. But let me start by telling our listeners a little bit about this tool. In 2018, College Board began to pilot an information tool with a small group of volunteer colleges. I think there were about 50 of them, to start using this data in their application evaluations and work with the College Board on determining what was useful about it, what information it was yielding that was helpful in the admissions process. So I happen to be, that was actually my first year away from the high school side, and I was reading applications for a university that was in the pilot program. So I remember it vaguely, but I do remember the instructions and training that we received on how we were to use it in the reading process. So it was new to everybody at that time. Now, what is it exactly? So this is College Board's way of using data that it receives as part of its testing program. So when I say that, I mean the SAT program and the AP program. And the goal of the landscape, which unfortunately, when it began, it was supposed to be known as the Environmental Context Dashboard, the ECD, but nobody called it that. Right from day one, it got the nickname of the adversity score because it seemed very clear to the colleges that this data that was then integrated and put on a 0 to 100 score reflected the level of disadvantage that students in a particular high school were experiencing. The data that was used was a lot of census data. It was IPEDS data. It was, what is it, Mark? NCCS, NCES data, National Center for Education Statistics, the Common Core of data. I'm reading a laundry list of a lot of data, but census data was really contributing powerfully to this so that students could be identified not just with their school, but with the neighborhoods that fed into that high school. So right off the bat, you can see why for some students that it's schools that are either, like Lindsay's question, are not homogeneous, or students who don't attend high school in their neighborhood, right? It's really data about kids in schools who go to their local public high school.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So magnet schools, all sorts of charter schools, private schools, religious schools, you name it, that are gathering kids from, often a broad range of neighborhoods. The data is kind of not as useful. So what do I mean by the data that you receive? So when I was reading applications in that early time, and I was getting this environmental context, AKA adversity score, it was a compilation of a bunch of things. There are 3 categories of information that are reflected. And Lindsay, you may already know this, so I apologize but you may not, because unless you're scouring the website, you're not going to find this. Number 1 is basic high school data. So locale, which is rural, suburban, inner city. Senior class size, they use 3 years of average data from the College Board program, testing program. Average SAT scores. Now, those are scores over a 3-year period that were submitted to colleges from the College Board. So I was thinking at the time, because the university that I was reading for was already test optional. This was pre-pandemic, but they had been test optional for a while. So these would have been scores that were collected post admissions decision and enrollment, right? Because even if you apply test optional to a college, you're admitted, you enroll, whoopee. At that point, the college will require a student to submit their scores from the testing agency. And for exactly this purpose and for research purposes, right? So there you go. The students who were ACT takers, the College Board concorded their ACT scores. Okay, so basically that means they turned them into SAT scores on their published concordance. right? Which all of us use, right?
Right. The conversion tables. Yeah.
It's a conversion table. That's right. Statistically concordant. I like that word. But so the numbers here reflected any scores that had been sent to colleges officially by College Board. So the other piece of information in the basic high school data category is AP participation and performance. And I want to mention that because I'm going to come back to the pieces of this that does influence readers. Okay, so I know this is TMI, but I'm going to boil it down to where I, as a reader, at least 2 universities, right, that used the landscape, how it was influential in the application reading process. So the second category of information was test score comparison. So this is where an applicant's test score is compared to others from the same high school. So on the landscape tool, when someone is reading an application, they can see literally on a meter, 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile, where the student scores fall in that distribution. Okay, this is probably the biggest point that anybody can make about the landscape tool, that it is an index of disadvantage, but it's basically showing you where an individual student's scores fall in comparison to others from the same high school. So the student is not being compared to the range from that college, which is what we all think goes on. It's like, wow, I have this first gen kid who is from a disadvantaged home, works 20 hours a week. Her SATs are bottom 25% when I look at, Brown's or Haverford's or, MIT's score averages. But where does she actually compare to kids who are also attending that school? And is she at the top? Is she overachieving, perhaps, in terms of her scoring compared to students from like backgrounds, like influences?
Susan, let me say a word on that. I heard a presentation by Case Western Reserve not that long ago, and this question came up of how do I know whether or not to submit my scores? You guys are test optional. And I can't remember if it was the VP of enrollment. It was a senior person, Dean of Admission, Dean Director, senior person. He said, I hear more misinformation out there on this question than any other thing. And so he proceeded to shoot down what he often hears, which is either are you at the midpoint of our 25th to 75th percentile, or are you somewhere in the range of the 25th to 75th percentile? And his point was this, right? I want to know where you are in the context of your high school. Exactly the point you're mentioning. The part that's tricky about that is different schools will give you different answers. So, our listeners can't necessarily take away, that's how it works, because
right.
There are other schools that will say, if you're in the middle 50%, then that's good. Or there's even some that'll say, particularly if you're unhooked, you may want to be at the mid to higher. So it does end up being something even for us as experienced counselors that is tricky to try to figure out on an individual school by school basis.
Right. And the problem is we don't know which schools are paying attention to the landscape or view it as useful information. The university that I read for now, we look at anytime we have a student submitting their scores, we look at the landscape tool to see if they are scoring above the 50th or above the 75th percentile in their school population. Now that only works if they're going to their local public high school.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work if they're going to another kind of high school, but we do it for every single applicant, and we use it as the only score reference point. So we and this I think is true, and it's one of the one of the reasons that, Dartmouth and Brown and other schools, colleges that have gone back to requiring the SAT are using to defend their decision. And, do I believe it? Yeah, but they also don't want their scores to plummet.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be very choosy about which students they view through this lens, right? Because they don't want their overall scores to plummet. So it'll be interesting to see, now that we're returning at a couple of colleges anyway to a test required environment, what's going to happen there. But so this third domain of information, though, and then I'll finish this TMI introduction. The third domain of information is called high school and neighborhood indicators. And I think this is really where high school people would like to see how College Board has assessed them. Because this, the basic high school data is what it is. It's not, percentage on free and reduced lunch. It's the nature of the high school, how many kids go to 4-year, 2-year, military, vocational workforce, those pieces of information, which have always been extremely valuable. And I know Lindsay wants us to talk about the profile and how colleges figure that out. That's where we really count on the high schools giving us that information. But these high school and neighborhood indicators are college-bound attendance, household structure, median family income, housing stability, education levels, and crime. So this is sociological and census data, right? This isn't information that the high school would be putting on its profile, right? I find this really, really interesting. Except for college attendance, of course, and that should be on the profile. And College Board says research shows that these 6 indicators are related to students' education outcomes. 2 averages are created based on these 6 indicators. Values are shown on a scale from 1 to 100 relative to the U.S. average. Now, big point. The College Board took such a hit when this came out in, prior to 2020.
Susan, I have to tell you, I did a whole deep dive episode on environmental constant dashboard when it came out, the adversity score. I probably did a 30-minute segment on it. And then it was no later than that, I had to turn around and say, oh, they're getting rid of it, but they're rolling out this new project landscape. So starting to make us feel like the podcast has been around a while, because all this stuff, was stuff that was happening live when we were on, and we did sessions on this. And then when I did a week at that Harvard Seeker program, of course, Coleman was there, and everybody was peppering them with questions about all this stuff. This was in the time when they were switching between them and letting and explaining how landscape was going to be different. And it's interesting because I can't remember back, but it feels like that was more of a marketing switch. Does it feel like a marketing switch than a complete overhaul? But it seems like it worked, though. It didn't get the backlash that it got with the adversity score.
There was no overhaul, Mark, at all.
Yes.
What was overhauled was how the information was presented.
Yeah.
And, some people said it was whitewashing the information. Truthfully, it was incredibly inappropriate for them to assign a scale.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is where College Board, their brain just falls out from time to time, because they, I hate to say it, but they're not educators. They're business people, and they are, they're taking education as a commodity. And well, let's not go there, but so what they did is they presented it in a different way, so it was more palatable. They took away the 0 to 100. They still are not reporting any student level data, of course, of course, but that means that the colleges that receive the data, which is now called basically high school and neighborhood information for colleges. That's what the landscape is. It's supposed to be more descriptive than statistical. So I'm all for that. I mean, colleges have to decide how they're going to use it. And, as I mentioned, just from my experience with the university where I read now, which is a pretty selective place, what they're using it for is to advantage students whose scores are positioning them above average in their high school, but who they are in an environment that is heavily laden with disadvantage. Okay. And they tell that through the neighborhood and high school indicators. Now, does this replace the school's profile? Absolutely not. And Lindsay, this is where you're in a very powerful position to continue to support, your students. Is we as application readers rely very heavily on how a school shares information that basically for us is the environmental context in a much richer and more descriptive fashion. What we don't always know is what you mentioned in your question, which is that you have students, an unusual range of students from across the socioeconomic scale, because public schools that are not magnets, public schools that are serving a local neighborhood or series of neighborhoods, generally don't have that. And in the College Board's research, it says that there is often SES and to a certain extent racial homogeneity within high schools, public high schools that are neighborhood high schools. Growing up in New York City, this was so obvious. It was completely obvious. The only, it was a while ago, but the only integrated high schools were the magnet schools, because the neighborhoods were not very well integrated, in the last century. And I'm not sure they are now, but the schools are.
Susan, I have a question for you. So it has become a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, and I've brought it up on some other podcasts, but I felt this way back when you and I were working together, but I really felt this in my 14 years at KIPP. So obviously, KIPP's the nation's largest charter school network, and a lot of schools would come in sort of for their quote unquote diversity recruitment and put us on their visit tab and then create special programs, fly-in programs and things. And what I observed over the years was that the kids that got the most, this makes perfect sense. It's some of the stuff, Jay Rosner talks about, but understandably, the kids that did the best were kids that were coming from backgrounds where the SES was there. So it was either the education was there for the parents and or the income, because charter school, unlike, for example, the Cristo Rey Network is a group of Jesuit schools, around 35 across the country, but they have income cutoffs. With us, it was neighborhood based. So you would have some families that would say, oh, this is like a very good education and I don't have to pay tuition. And they would come in, and like all of the kids that I worked with, that with very few exceptions, that were going to like the Princetons and the Dukes and the places like that, when you saw where their parents went to college or what their income was, it was significantly different than the population at large. And one of my questions always is, for people that are using landscape, like a family like that is quite advantaged, but they're in a school that doesn't look advantaged, it's very easy for them to stand out. And to what degree is that caught or taken into consideration? Because I haven't felt like it has been to the extent that I feel it should be. Now, you could also argue that, if you're talking about some of these schools, these really highly selective schools, to use Roz Chetty's data, 38 schools out there that have more kids from the top 1% than the bottom 60. The more middle class someone is in their socialization, the more likely they are to not be an attrition risk.
Right.
Is it just middle class mores and socialization and travel and all of that? But those were the kids that were the easiest to place. And I sort of felt like they got the benefit of being seen as diversity for the school, and they popped within the context of the comparisons. And no fault against theirs. These were great kids, love these kids, and they took advantage of their opportunities. But they were totally different than a first-gen family or a lower Pell Grant family or someone that just hadn't had the travel or the exposure and all the advantages that come with social class.
Absolutely.
Do you feel from the schools that you've read at, there's a lot of training on that? Or do you think it's just like, wow, look at this superstar coming from this context of this school, and you're so happy to get someone like that other stuff sort of gets overlooked?
No, I think it's a huge priority to notice things like that in the reading process. And obviously, I can't speak for everyone, but, in my college counseling work, I see responses to applications that show me that colleges are paying. Every college loves the student who brings in some element of diversity and perspective, but who also comes from a very well-resourced background. Because you're right, they are at no risk or very, very low risk, right? Especially if the college does a lot of business with that school or CBO and understands the quality of education and services in that school. I think, and I remember, when I read for Bates years ago, we would get applications from, really under-resourced inner city schools. And these were kids whose counselors knew that the college would meet full financial need, would do a fly-in, get the kids on campus ahead of time, and they were winging it. And those students, we knew that they posed a risk because of the degree of culture difference and educational difference. But we also, as a college, we knew what to look for in an application, kind of the indices, the predictors of success. And for a small liberal arts college that understood personal qualities at a time where a lot of colleges kind of weren't doing that yet, but where you kind of knew what it was going to take for a student from a different background, whether it was from a country thousands of miles away or Dorchester, Boston, right? Or Strawberry Mansion, Philadelphia, or Seward Park, New York City. We knew. And was there risk in that? Of course there was. But colleges that really are mission driven and view themselves as an instrument of social mobility, that's what they're looking for. And they want to make as many affirmative decisions in that regard as they can to continue that piece of them that's been there for hundreds of years. Public universities, of course, when you look at Penn State's mission statement, I'm the big mission statement fan. It's, talks about the education of all students for the good of the Commonwealth, and elevating students from, generational poverty and things like that. So that's what colleges do. Does everybody do that? Probably not. Some colleges are trying to stay afloat financially, and they can't admit a lot of kids with, enormous need. Every time at Bates, we admitted a student who needed a full ride, literally tuition, room, and board based on need, zero family contribution. We had to say, should we spread this money out over 5 kids?
Yeah. Oh, I remember those conversations. Yeah.
And we did that. So, colleges, they have algorithms, they have strategies, they have budgets, and they're never ignoring all these things that we're talking about. And I think the landscape hasn't replaced the scrutiny of the school profile. It's added to the kind of information that a college can factor in. And you know what? If it forces some colleges to look at a student's SATs, if they're a submitter, And of course, now some of the kids applying to these, highly rejected colleges are going to be submitters. First of all, I think that number is going to decline precipitously at those universities that have brought scores back into the picture. But for the kids that are submitting, whether it's, Yale, MIT, Georgia Tech,
Sure.
it should give school counselors a way to explain to kids that they should go for it, that they shouldn't look at the common data set and see that their scores are in the bottom 25% and say, well, I'm not applying there. That they can think a little bit more about looking at their school profile and seeing where they fall relative to their fellow seniors.
Yeah, and a high school counselor, I mean, I would encourage high school counselors to ask these questions to colleges. Like, where would you want to see my kid within the context of our school for it to be seen as an acceptable place? Like you mentioned, 50th, 75th percentile, everybody's going to be different on that, right? Certain schools may say 90th or 95th,
right,
or even lower, depending on their selectivity. I don't even have time to get into this now, Susan, but, I think I just want to share it. The other thing I think about a lot is, when schools mention their data on how the SAT predicts, first year college performance. One of the things that I've always found interesting about that is to the extent to which someone is navigating a completely different cultural milieu, how would you expect that not to impact first year GPA?
Of course.
Right? I mean, if you took an American kid and say you're going to school in like Bangladesh or Zimbabwe or someplace that's completely foreign to them, there's probably going to be some cultural adjustments that will impact the academics. I think looking at 4-year GPA is a lot better. But anyway, I'm totally going off on a tangent, but yeah, I think a lot about these issues around social class. That's why, I love that book Unequal Childhoods Annette Lareau wrote when she was at Temple. Now she's at Penn, right? On how different kids are raised differently and how it impacts them educationally. But we should wind down now on this. Any final thoughts you want to share, or do you think you covered everything?
Well, I think for Lindsay, her school, which does sound a little unusual because of the wide range, and it's a public school and a wide range. And I didn't get the impression that it's a magnet school of any kind. I think the content that she can put in the school profile describing that will really be valued, because profiles are looked at and valued very, very highly by colleges.
Sure.
And I tell you, I see hundreds and hundreds of them every year, and they're not getting better. They really aren't. They're just a lot of sad, sometimes not even there at all. But and I'll go search on a website, I'll go Google for a profile when I'm reading an application. But it just is really, really valuable. And it advantages students for colleges to understand things like what you mentioned, Lindsay. So find a way to describe the nature of the student body, the blessing that diversity brings to the mix and everybody's educational experience, and how that accounts for some of your school statistics.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate your insights. It's great having read at 2 schools using it and being able to incorporate that into this conversation. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So Catherine from Virginia. All right, we'll play the question. And why don't we discuss each question individually, because they're 2 questions, but they're very different. So why don't we take her first question and thoroughly talk through that one, and then take her second question on. So I know our listeners are wondering, what are you talking about? So we'll play it and chime in.
Hi, YCBK team. Thank you so much for your podcast. I learn many new things every week, and I have 2 questions. This is Catherine from Virginia, and my questions are, first, you recently said that WPI had given out merit money to someone, and that it was a good school, well respected, and students end up with good jobs that make good money afterwards. And I wonder, how do you know that? How do you know if a college has good outcomes? I get a little nervous with so many colleges closing when I see them giving out a ton of money, and I do go check their financials. So I just want to know, how would we know if a college is well respected and will end in a job, which is the whole point of college? My second question is with AP tests coming out this week, the scores. My son, who's a rising junior, already has 2 3s on AP tests, so I expect he will end up with a third 3 or higher on AP tests, which would make him an AP scholar. Is that something we bother to put on his college application? He doesn't have any national awards. He's not doing anything that would end in a national award, so that would probably be his only one. But is it something that colleges find insignificant and silly? He's not applying to Ivies or anything like that. Nothing super competitive. He'll probably apply state schools, some STEM schools like WPI. Would we put the AP Scholar as a recognition? Thanks so much, and we really, really appreciate your advice.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts about how you can tell if colleges have good outcomes. I mean, one is, I think it's College Scorecard, right?
Yep, College
There's a
Scorecard.
website
Yep.
that you can check, employment rates of students, and you can look at their starting salaries in different fields. So you can get an idea from that. I also think that you can probably, let's say your kid wants to major in engineering, like chemical engineering from a certain school. If you put that into LinkedIn and do a search, then you'll probably see, where recent graduates from that school have ended up, and that's another way to do a bit more research. So those would be my 2 initial go-tos.
Yeah, and those were my initial go-tos as well. LinkedIn is fantastic. I once did a 15-minute deep dive on that it was for people that had given a gift to the podcast. But if anyone's interested, if they shoot an email in, I'll be happy to send them that 15-minute overview on how to use LinkedIn step by step. Because there are some steps involved. If you just tell someone to do it, they probably won't figure it out on their own. But I'm happy to send that to anyone who asks for it. Just, shoot us an email at questions@yourcollegebounkid.com. College Scorecard's great, and the College Scorecard's gotten better than it used to, just because they now allow you to compare schools by major. And that's a big improvement, because before they did that, I mean, all of the STEM-based, especially the engineering type schools, they're always going to have the highest salaries and incomes. They're always going to have that, right? And so it's going to benefit a WPI on RPI. It really is. Illinois Tech, it is, because those jobs, they tend to have majors that pay better. But it's a lot better now because you can compare major by major. The only thing that I do like to warn people is, in general, salaries will be higher in higher cost areas.
Exactly.
And that's not necessarily going to accommodate for that, right? So if like if you're in the Bay Area, the salaries, you're in Manhattan, the salaries just going to be higher than if you're like in Kentucky or Southern Ohio or Arkansas or something, right? So just keep in mind, a lot of times when a school is in an area where the cost of living is lower, a lot of times just in general, not always, of course, but there are going to be an inordinate number of people that end up working within a few hours of the college. And so that's just the one thing that you have to take into consideration, with College Scorecard. The other things that I would say is you definitely want to look at the institutional research section of each college's website, because a lot of times they have like gold information there. Like they'll run surveys of graduates and a lot of reports, and sometimes very detailed reports. I mentioned RPI earlier. They have just a fantastic section on all of their outcomes, by major, broken down, real good detailed information there. And I know some of them, I think, well, it's on the school's website. I mean, these are researchers. They're not marketers. So it's not like just marketing spin. Like it's really, it's just objective research that's been conducted. And so that's another really good place to go just for outcomes. So those are my 3 go-tos for that. LinkedIn, College Scorecard, and the institutional research section of the website. Anything else you want to add to part 1?
No, I mean, I think that sounds really good. And it's a great question. And, sometimes I think we all wish that there was more transparency around this in terms of getting this type of data. But I mean, there's so many confounding variables, right? In terms of what students want to do, where they want to live, um, you know, different student circumstances. So it's a little bit hard to compare school to school, but I think these are all great spots.
Yeah, I mean, there is one other thing I didn't say. It is still worth it, in my opinion, to reach out to the Career Center at various schools. They sometimes have information that's not necessarily always on that institutional research page. And it's just worth reaching out to them with very specific questions that you might have about where graduates end up with certain degrees. And I find, they're very, very accommodating, so that's another fourth source that just kind of popped in my mind. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
No, great question. Thank you so much, Catherine from Virginia. Send us some more questions.
Well, she did send us another question, right?
Oh, I know. We're going to take that, but I mean more than that. but
okay.
but let's transition to her next one.
All right.
Lisa, I wanted to also circle back on the financial part too. Now, you and I have answered this question before. Exact question, and I know Catherine says she looks up the financials, but I felt part of what was implied in her question is a school financially stable? I know she specifically focused on career outcomes, but when she said, I get nervous, like schools, you hear about schools closing. So even that this question's come up a lot, you and I have even answered it not that long ago. We get new listeners all the time. And so I wanted to just say a few things about also the financial stability of a school. Anything you want to say on that at all? Like sources for people? If they want to?
I mean, I think there's a number. I mean, I think that so you probably look at the math literate sources and I look at the math illiterate sources. And so
you're funny.
I have found the most user-friendly for me source is looking at the Forbes ratings because they give them letter grades and I understand letters. But that of course is not a complete description of all the schools, but that's where I generally look. But I know you will talk about some other more advanced sorts of websites.
You know me pretty well, don't you, over there?
I think so.
So Forbes Financial Tracker is a good place. Hechinger Report also has, if you want someone that's done a lot of research for you and just gone in and you can punch it in and look at a school, I think Hechinger and Forbes have two of the better ones for that. But there's some other things if you really want to get more into the weeds. You can look up the school's 990. Every school has to produce a 990, which is their financial statements. You can go to guidestar.org and look up their 990. And if you listen to an interview I did with Dr. Roger Parrott, who is the president of Belhaven, and you could just go to yourcosmicKid.com, and then you'll see the magnifying glass on the far right and just doesn't put in any of that stuff. Belhaven, Parrott. He went into exactly where to go in the 990 to look for. It's better for private schools, what he did. And then also, a couple other things you want to actually be looking at that are really important are the net tuition revenue of the school. That's extremely important because you want to see, are they bringing in more money than the year before, or is that going down? And so Common Data Set is great for that. And you want to look at enrollment trends. So if you want to look at enrollment trends for the last 5 years and net tuition revenue for the last 5 years, because sometimes net tuition revenue would be the single most important thing, because sometimes a school could be bringing in more students, but if they're discounting so heavily that they're not getting more revenue, that's not good. But I encourage people to look at both revenue trends for the last 5 years and enrollment trends for the last 5 years. And all of that is in Common Data Set. I did an interview with Jeffrey Salingo probably about 2 or 3 months ago, where he showed you exactly where to go in Section H of Common Data Set to look at the net tuition revenue. And you can see the enrollment information in Section B. And just, you're going to have to pull it up for a few years and compare the numbers, but just look at the trends. It's worth doing this, especially There's one thing, and I was thinking about this earlier, Lisa. I was going to say something about this on a whole Monday episode, but let me say it now. When I talk to admission officers, senior level people around the country, more schools are in trouble than people realize. Like I'm talking about schools that have or that deny more kids than they admit. And they say things sometimes when I'm talking to them, like I can think of multiple conversations I've had in the last 6 months where if I was to mention the school, people would be like, wow, like one recently, they were telling me the first thing that goes is your programs. And so she wouldn't be surprised to see a whole bunch of majors slashed. She said, because you can't tap your endowment, only so much. And so you're going to see programs slashed, to make up for the budget. That's another good thing, too. Let me say that as well. If you're following the newspapers for schools, like the school newspapers, they're going to run articles if schools are slashing programs.
Right.
They are going to run articles on that. So that's another thing. I know this is work. It's not just a quick, easy, go to Forbes, go to Hechinger. But at a minimum, like let's say, maybe you don't do this for your entire list, but maybe like when you're down, I mean, you can, and I would recommend it if you're a researcher like that and you have the time and the will to do it. But let's say at least when you're down to like your final 3 or 4 schools you're really serious about, like it's worth doing a deep financial deep dive. And And I didn't think about the newspaper point until we were just talking. It popped in my head. But yeah, that's another tell is programs getting slashed. But yeah, I'm some of this is the FAFSA stuff that we're coming off of. Like that massively, massively impacted schools. In fact, I just had a person reach out to me, at a pretty reputable school and then said, would you like me to come on and do an interview on that? On that topic and just how much it impacted us. So, yeah. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that in. I realized Carlynn didn't that wasn't part of her 2 questions, but I thought it was worth commenting on because she was expressing concerns about finances and she says she looks at that. So hopefully those are some other sources that can help someone that wants to do a deep dive. And I would strongly recommend it, at least for any school under real serious consideration. Friends, Catherine's next question took a while. Lisa and I spent almost 25 minutes doing a deep dive on that. So we're going to actually answer that not next Thursday, but the following Thursday on episode 459.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, I'm really excited about this 4-part interview you're going to hear over the next 4 weeks with Carlynn Greene, aka the Scholarship Guru. I really want students and parents to understand how to win outside and external scholarships. I find there's a lot of really bad advice out there, like, it's not worth applying. Oh, you can't win them. They're too difficult. You either have to be really, really poor, or you have to have a crazy, ridiculous GPA and test scores, neither of which are true. Now, it's been almost 4 years. I brought you an interview from one of my students, Kristen Mosley, who won 10 outside scholarships almost 4 years ago. And I recommend you go listen to that. But I've never actually done an interview with a scholarship specialist. And this is a very comprehensive interview. I would say we cover 25 to 30 of the most important questions and things you really need to know if you want to win outside scholarships. So let me tell you a little bit about part 1, which you'll be hearing today. In part 1, Carlynn gives her backstory. She explains how she became the scholarship guru. Carlynn explains what is an external scholarship. Carlynn tells you her favorite websites for searching for scholarships. Carlynn tells us how a student should update their scholarship profile, and she gives some great tips for having a successful scholarship profile. Carlynn gives some guidance to the person who's frustrated because they feel like the scholarships they are looking for are only for under-resourced students. Carlynn gives advice for students who are struggling with the discipline of applying for scholarships. That's really important. You have to hear what she says on that. And Carlynn tells us how many scholarships she believes students should apply to. Carlynn tells us where someone should start doing their scholarship research. Carlynn talks about professional associations and community foundations, and she tells us what community foundations are. And then I asked Carlynn if she tells her clients to focus on local scholarships. Hope you enjoy this interview this week and for the next 3 weeks. Listen and enjoy. Friends, I'm here with Carlynn Greene from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Carlynn.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, you have an acronym out there, or I don't know what you would call it, your slogan, or as the scholarship guru. And so we want to know a little bit about your backstory and walk us right up to what you're doing now and how you became known as the scholarship guru.
Yes, of course. So back in 2017, when I was a senior in high school, I won a lot of scholarships for my education, and then eventually I won a lot as a current college student as well. So between undergrad and grad school, 30 scholarships total. And so as a result of winning so much in 2017, I started a platform first on YouTube to teach people some of my strategies, tips, advice, if you will, on how to win back-to-back scholarships. And then eventually this grew into other social media platforms. So for instance, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, a bit on LinkedIn too. And I have various resources you could download on my website, scholarship-guru, that give scholarships to apply for, strategies on how to go about your essay, and even books and an online course as well. So various ways you can learn from me on how I've been able to help students for many years now win millions and millions of scholarships all across the globe and graduate debt-free.
Thank you for that. And there's a few things that attracted me to you, Carlynn. One of them is we have a mutual client, someone who I worked with, who you worked with, and she won 12 herself. And I was literally talking with her mom earlier today. She said definitely 6 of those she would have never won without your help. So she credits you for at least half of them.
Oh, wow.
And the other thing is, a lot of times when people start looking at scholarships and they say they want all these scholarships, they're confusing their language. Like they're counting any time they got money from a college. And that could be need-based institutional aid or merit-based institutional aid, which can be very plentiful out there. But I know in our pre-meeting, you clarified you won 30, but didn't you say something like 21 of them were external or outside scholarships, something like that?
Yes, so the vast majority of the scholarships I won were external scholarships. So they could be used at any university, really, as long as it's accredited. But often when we see those stories, every year of students winning $1 million or more in scholarships, 9 times out of 10, they're adding up the money that they received from specific schools that they apply to. But at the end of the day, you can only attend one school, so you can't keep that other scholarship money, right? And so if you ever hear a story of where someone won a whole bunch of money in external scholarships, they're more than likely keeping that money, having it refunded back to them to use how they like as it pertains to their education. I've had students use excess scholarship money to, let's say, buy a down payment on their new house or get a new laptop, new phone as it pertains to their education, right? Even with my education, I had a lot of excess scholarship money. And so I used that to buy a new camera, which pertained to what I was studying, which was broadcast journalism.
Yeah. And it's important to make that differentiation because even institutional money, you can get institutional need-based money just because you complete the FAFSA or the CSS profile and you have a financial need and you apply to schools where your need is deemed to be greater than the cost of attendance, and you're going to get it automatically. You can also get institutional merit-based scholarships to schools that use your admission application as the scholarship application and do an auto scholarship. So that's not as impressive to me when I see those numbers, because that tells me oftentimes that people might have applied to a lot of schools or they had a great financial need. I've seen people list the service academies with, huge dollars when you add them up. But this is the trickier part that people don't really know how to navigate. And that's our subject for our conversation today. So let's start out with a basic question. What's the definition of an outside scholarship or an external scholarship?
Yes, so with an external scholarship, this is aid that can be used at a university or even a community college, and it can essentially be used at any type of school rather than being designated to a specific school, right? And so, for instance, there's also institutional scholarships, which you were talking about, the stories that we hear every year where people are mainly adding up the institutional aid that they're receiving. But again, oftentimes they cannot keep all of that money. So at the end of the day, it's just goes away.
So we're talking here, and I oftentimes use a quick acronym, but tell me if I'm missing anything here. So when I'm referring to these, I'll say to people, these are oftentimes scholarships that come from corporations, churches or religious organizations, civic organizations, foundations, and philanthropists. Do you feel that covers it, or is there anything that
Yes, and
wasn't
also
in there
like
that
professional organizations relating to what you're studying. Like, for instance, a lot of the scholarships I got as a current college student in college came from professional organizations pertaining to journalism, broadcasting, media arts, and so forth.
Yeah, and I want to follow back up that with you a little later when we get into scholarships for current college students. But let me start with one of the complaints I often hear, which are there's tens of thousands of these outside scholarships out there. It's totally overwhelming. What are the best places for a student to find outside or external scholarships that are a good fit or a good match for them?
Yes, of course, there's many places you can find them, but my top 3 platforms I recommend using include bold.org, scholarships.com, as well as goingmerry.com. And so with Going Merry specifically, they have an app you can use, so you can apply for scholarships from the convenience of your phone, and they even have like a feature where you can bulk apply for certain scholarships, which can save you a lot of time. And then with bold.org, their specific scholarships listed can only be applied for via their platform. So make sure that you create a free account on all 3 of these platforms, look through their scholarships, and optimize your profile as much as possible so you're better matched with their algorithm to scholarships that you would be more likely to win.
No, that's great. Yeah, those are ones I like a lot too, and they save you work, right? Going Merry and Bold, like once you don't have to keep constantly putting in all your information, you can use a lot of the same information for multiple scholarships with those two. You talked about making sure your profile is updated. Talk to us a little bit more about that. What's involved in your profile? What are some of the things where you see people make a mistake because they don't update something they should update?
Yeah, I would say to try and update your profile on these scholarship websites at least once a semester, or as soon as you achieve something within your life as it pertains to like your future career aspirations and all that, as soon as you can, right? This is very important. And some other elements that go into a successful scholarship profile on these websites is mentioning your why, right? Like what initially inspired you, as well as how you plan to uniquely contribute to your field. And this can also go for how you would go about communicating like your goals, your aspirations, and so forth within your scholarship essay. Because like, let's say that you are an aspiring medical school student, right? However, already everyone in medical school is already going to have like very great stats, right? And they're all there wanting to help people. So with that, you would have to have a unique angle on how you hope to uniquely contribute to the field of medicine, whether that's like a specific sector of medicine, how you want to on the local level, and so forth. So if you can communicate this within your scholarship essay, within your scholarship profile on these websites, that will give you a leg up when it comes to competing for this type of stuff.
No, that's great. That's great.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
This is Linda, and today's recommended resource is SwiftStudent. SwiftStudent is a cloud-based service that assists prospective college students and their families navigate financial aid challenges. It offers customizable templates that can be used for several financial aid requests, like appeals for additional aid, adjustments due to special circumstances, or asking for an extension of a missed financial aid deadline. Each template provides detailed instructions and examples, allowing you to tailor the letter for your unique situation. Swift Student is free and doesn't share or sell your students' information. Learn more at formswift.com/swift-student or just Google Swift Student.
There's another reason why I wanted to interview you, Carlynn, because one of the complaints that I will hear from students that embark on a scholarship journey is it seems like everyone is targeting first gen or Pell Grant or under-resourced. And that's not who I am. And so am I wasting my time? But I know that in our conversations, that was not the social economic demographic you were coming from, but yet that was not a hindrance for you winning scholarships. Well, what would you say to the person who feels like aren't all of the scholarships out there really targeting just under-resourced students? And that's not who I am, so I guess I'm out of luck.
Yeah, I would say, well, for one, try to understand the difference between need-based scholarships versus ones where you have to demonstrate need, right? So like, let's say, for instance, your family already makes a considerable amount of money, so you don't really qualify for getting aid after you filled out the FAFSA or whatever else profile. But you have instead something else that can demonstrate the fact that you are in need. So let's say your family has a lot of medical debt or something else that pertains to as to why they wouldn't necessarily be able to cover your education as someone would assume based off how much they make with their income. That can help with communicating your need. And then if you don't necessarily have that, you can instead communicate within your scholarship essay how you hope to help those who are in need in a unique way. And then we could also mainly focus on scholarships that are more so relating to like your why, how you hope to uniquely contribute to those in your field, to those in your local community, or even global community if you want to go that far as well. But yeah, there's just so many ways you can go about communicating your message outside of mentioning that you are in need.
Thank you for that. So another challenge that students encounter, and I would say this would also be my own kids as well. This is how I like to put this. With school, you have tests, you have quizzes, you have papers, you have parent-teacher conferences, you have attendance reports, and many other things that are sort of built-in structure, built-in ways of kind of getting your body to do maybe what your mind doesn't want to do but knows that it should do. But one of the problems that I encounter with scholarships is if somebody doesn't do them, they just don't do them. Like, it's not like you're going to fail and you're not going to graduate or something. And so with so many distractions out there, whether it's social life, social media, whatever, what are your tips to help somebody to be disciplined to do what they need to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say to try to have an accountability partner. So whether that's like a friend, a sibling who might be also looking for scholarships, or even your parents. Honestly, your parent would probably be your best shot at having an accountability partner. So when I was initially applying for scholarships, already I was overwhelmed from doing that and like the FAFSA application and the college applications as well. So my mom, she was over like the FAFSA, she was over the college applications, and then I was solely focused on scholarship applications. So that took a lot off my workload, and it really helped because like my senior year, I was so busy, especially fall semester. I was in marching band. I went to a very competitive high school for it, played the flute and everything. And so fall semester, I didn't really apply for many scholarships. I was too preoccupied with that. So I only really got serious once I had more free time in the spring semester. And that's when I was starting to see back-to-back winning results.
No, that's great. That's great. I've worked with some families where the parent has been the researcher and they've found them, and then the student did all the applications.
Yes, that's also a great strategy.
Yeah. And then setting a goal. I've seen people set a goal, said, well, we're going to do one a week or anything like that. Do you recommend goal setting, and how many do you recommend students apply to?
Yes, I definitely recommend goal setting. I would say try to apply for like 7 scholarships per week, which would basically be 1 per day, right? And if you can't do that, maybe 5 per week. Just at least 1 application at the bare minimum per week so that you're consistently applying and that you have that mindset throughout the process. And I would also say it helps to bulk research when you have more free time. So like, let's say it's summer break, right? Well, you can bulk research scholarships that you're currently eligible for, as well as scholarships that you will be eligible for in the near future. So like, let's say you're currently an undergrad, right? But you know that with your degree plan, your future career path, that you will have to also go to grad school. Well, you can go ahead and bulk research graduate level scholarships so that by the time you have advanced to that stage, the research is already out of the way for the most part. Of course, there'll be other opportunities that show up over time, like brand new scholarships, right? But for the most part, it's done, and you just have to go in with effectively communicating yourself within your application.
So how would somebody do scholarship research? Like, where would they start? What does that look like?
Yeah, so outside of the scholarship search engines, there's also like professional organizations. So I mentioned this briefly earlier with this interview here. So basically, you would go to Google, right, and then type in the name of your major. So as an example of this, my major was broadcast journalism. So I would go to Google, type in broadcast journalism, professional organizations, and then eventually a blog post, some sort of website will pop up listing all of these professional organizations across the United States. And then from there, you would individually create tabs for each of those websites and see if they have scholarships. 9 times out of 10, they have scholarships. And if they don't have scholarships, they might have something else you can benefit from, like internships or like scholarships for students to attend their conferences. That's a great way to get your leg in the door to get a career as soon as you graduate. That was basically one of my hacks. But anywho, and then also with these professional organizations, you want to apply to their opportunities at the local state level as well. So for instance, I won a scholarship from the Society of Professional Journalists, their DFW Texas chapter. And so because it was specific to my state, specific to my major, it was less competitive in comparison to another scholarship for journalism students all across the nation. So I would definitely recommend doing that. And then there's also finding scholarships from like community foundations. That's another great resource for finding local opportunities within your specific state. And if you are like an out-of-state student, right, you would be looking at community foundations not only in the state of where you're studying, but also the state of where you originally were based. So you could basically double your eligibility in some cases with that.
Carlynn, can you explain what a community foundation is in case somebody doesn't know?
Yeah, so community foundations, basically, they have like scholarship opportunities. They might even have like business grants you can apply to, and various other things where all this money is just aggregated into one place and you just submit an application and hopefully it ends up working out for you. And for context, I was able to win about two exact community foundation scholarships, once my senior year of high school and then again my senior year of college.
Thank you. Now, one of the things that I always preach when it comes to scholarships is local, starting and immediately in your backyard. Do you also teach that? And that's a two-parter. What are some sources locally that you recommend people use to find local scholarships?
Yes, so I definitely recommend to start local. One of the biggest mistakes people do as to why they're never really winning scholarships in the first place is because they start off national. They're applying for like the really big and highly advertised scholarships like the one from Google and Microsoft and so forth. And of course, you can still apply to these, but these are going to be a lot more competitive. Most of the scholarships I won were local or specific to like my certain city, county, or overall state of Texas.
Friends, this concludes the first part of my 4-part interview with Carlynn Greene, aka the Scholarship Guru. If you enjoyed this, I strongly recommend you go to yourcollegeboundkid.com/events because Carlynn's doing a webinar for us on October 8th. And this time we'll actually have reminders set up. In fact, Linda already went in and set the reminders up. So we'd love to see you there. You can ask Carlynn your questions directly to her. See you next week.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, the last 2 weeks we've had part 1 and part 2. This will be part 3, which will be the final part. Listen and enjoy.
Well,
I mean, I would say too, like, because just if you want to visit the University of South Carolina, I've been trying to schedule a visit all summer for my
Good
middle
luck.
daughter, Sonia, and it is very hard to get. And I did manage to get one yesterday, but you
I know
have
it's
to
in the
go
morning at
on.
9 a.m.
It's at 8 a.m.
Yeah,
8
I know.
a.m.
I know.
You go on, and hopefully, if I managed to get one for like middle of August, but you get what you get. And you can get one day, but those tours like only have 30 spots in them. And you think about all the people who want to come and visit that school.
So let me say something about that. So they only do one tour a day. And because of how hot it is in the summer. And I think they've moved it from 9 to 8 since I was there, because it was 9 when I was there. I was just there in June.
No, I mean, like, you have to get online to reserve your tour at 8 a.m. The tour starts at 9 a.m.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, but one thing they do, which I would encourage you, and I'm going to talk more about this in more podcasts. I'm really a fan of self-guided tours and talking with students. And they have a good self-guided tour. Like some of them, like Charleston, not so much, right? To kind of give you the map and walk around. But they have the audio and all that. But then the thing they have that's really good, and Clemson also has this as well, which is you can just walk in and say you want to go talk to either an admissions person or a tour guide. And then they have people sitting there waiting for you to sit down and talk with, which is really nice. And I would encourage people to do that.
Yeah, and if you know what you want to study, like they do have departmental information sessions that frequently do not fill up. So if you're interested in the business school or the School of Hospitality Management or like the public health school, like you can go and sign up on the day that you get your tour for a more specialized experience. And those are usually easier to get into.
Yeah, let me share a little more about some of the admission stuff, some numbers, some stats, and a little bit more about scholarships. So most of their scholarships are auto scholarships, meaning your admission application is your scholarship application. The honors college ones are the exception. With the honors college comes in-state tuition. But even some of the capstone scholars, so Lisa talked about the capstone scholarship, which, as she mentioned, it's very, very focused on extracurriculars and experiential. Some capstone scholars get in-state tuition automatically. So, like I said, it can be incredibly affordable. Typical profile, capstone scholars, 1340 to 1420, 30 to 32 ACT. Now, the one thing for their honor scholars and their capstone, they don't do the big difference in-state, out-of-state that they do for regular admission. They still expect everybody to sort of kind of be there. And honors college, they're looking for GPAs in the top 1% to 5% typically of their high school, with a high testing profile. They have been putting more emphasis on essays in recent years because of test optional. And so they really put more emphasis on the essay. And their apps are up. They went from 37,000 to 39,000, 42,000 this recent year for 6,500 enrolled. Once again, 65% admit rate. And they're, around 27,000 undergrads and close to 6,000 grad students. 73% white, 8.8% black, 4% Hispanic, 3% Asian, low Jewish percentage, 53.9% women, 46.1% male. Which is actually more gender balanced. Like both UNC and UCLA are over 60. UNC is 62. And UCLA is like almost 61. So, that's more gender balanced than you see at a lot of schools. I think I said the frat and sorority thing wrong the other time. It's 1 in 5 guys in a frat, 1 in 3 in a sorority.
Right. Yeah,
it's the opposite.
That's right.
Yeah, it's 1 in 3. They're about 18% Pell, 20% first gen, 29% yield, meaning they accept 100 to get 29. And, one thing you can get intimidated by, but you shouldn't, is the GPA. So if you're used to like a real strict 4.0 scale, when you look at their GPAs, you're going to see like 4.1 to 4.7 and 4.3. And that's because they recalculate and they're giving like a full point for AP and dual enrollment and IB, but very generous weighting for honors in advance. So you kind of don't get intimidated by the GPA. I mean, they basically said it's an A-B student with probably more A's than B's in your core classes. That's a typical profile that they're looking for. And they're not that strict. Like, they want to see you go like a year past algebra 2 in your math. And even like what they count for like lab sciences is pretty generous, and they're okay with 2 years of the same foreign language. You don't need 3. So it's not sort of as much strictness on your rigor as you see from some schools. Like, most people can fulfill what they're looking for when it comes to academic qualifications to fulfill the sort of curriculum needs. Anything you want to say on that, Lisa?
No, I think that was, our experience. I mean, just from like anecdotally, I mean, a lot of the kids who did end up going to the honors college there, I mean, they might have gotten admitted to an Ivy or, some really prestigious schools, but financially it was so much of a better deal for them to go to the honors college, and the educational opportunities that they had were phenomenal. So, I mean, they really do have a high caliber of student in that honors college.
Oh, yeah. I mean, top 1 to 5% of kids in the class. And then here's the thing. If you're getting in-state, I mean, in-state is low in South Carolina. It's around $9,000 for tuition. So think, and even the room and board charges are a lot less than a lot of other schools. Like, when you compare line item by line item across the board, it's really a pretty good financial bargain. So I'll just say a few more things about some of their merit scholarships, and then briefly touch on who it's good for and who it's not good for. So they've got 6 different levels of 6 tiers. So it's a lot. But they have, 6 tiers. They've got a 5K tier, 10K tier, 15K tier. Then they have another 3 that take the in-state tuition. And then there's dollars on top of that. So they have a stamp scholarship, which is super generous. And some of these scholarships you do have to interview for, some of their top ones, and some of them you don't. And then they have the McNair Scholarship, which is just a notch down from that. Then they have their Horseshoe Scholars, which is just a notch down for that. But those are their 3 most prestigious programs that they have. 45 non-residents that have really strong academic awards and leadership, because they do look for that. They all get invited to come to an interview weekend. And then they end up naming like 5 stamps and 20 McNairs and 20 Horseshoe Scholars for out of that whole group. And then they go down to that next level. And last year, those students in that level, they were like 15, 50, 35 ACT. So once again, most of the time, those kids are going to come with scores. They just made a point that one person that got their high scholarship didn't have any scores at all. And most of those in the top 3 were actually in the top 1% of their class.
Yeah.
So I've just got some thoughts on who I think it's good for, and I'd love to see what you would think about this, Lisa. And I'll just share a few thoughts on who I think would really like South Carolina and who may not like it. So I'd say someone who loves school spirit, who likes a larger school but still a personal feel. You want to go in a city, be in a city, or you want a beautiful campus. You like warmer weather. You're looking for a strong program in like international business or just business in general, global studies, political science, like with the state capitol being there. It's a very strong political science school. Public health, criminal justice, sports management, nursing, biology, and journalism. I think those are really marquee programs with engineering on the rise. Someone who's okay with a school that's going to be like 3/4 white. Not everybody is, compared to like California diversity. Very active fraternities and sororities, fantastic facilities, amazing affordability. So those are just a few things. And who I think may not like it, someone who just really, really does not want even intro classes to be large. So we work with students. I don't want fraternities. I don't want sororities. And we work with progressives that wouldn't be comfortable with sort of a 50-50 political student body. And then a lot of times, students want to see more of a critical mass of people that look like them. So it has a low Asian population, a low Jewish population, a low Hispanic population, and a pretty small international population, although the grad school is very international, but not so much for undergrad. So those are some things. Well, anything you want to add to that I didn't cover?
No, I think you hit the high points. I mean, I end up usually kind of referring it to students who really want that Southern football experience, who want school spirit, who are good students, but maybe Georgia or UNC is not going to be viable for them. and, who want to participate in Greek life. I will say the one thing that I don't like about the school is that they have the August rush. So freshmen come and rush before they've even, basically that's their first experience with the campus as they set foot on the campus. Rush, they're somehow picking their sorority or fraternity. I have no idea how they do that. And then, then school starts. I myself prefer like the January rush because it gives people, a good 4 or 5 months just to get acclimated and see what they, think and learn more about the fraternities and sororities. But, I think it can be a school that fits a lot of people. I think it can meet a lot of needs.
I completely agree. And I would also say, if you're someone who feels like, South Carolina, I don't think that's the brand that I'm looking for, I would just say keep an open mind, because I'm pretty sure that you will be impressed if you were to visit it. Now, it's not for everybody. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but no school's for everybody.
No.
But when you think of those things, like those are a lot of positives, and not especially, but just the affordability piece just can bring a whole lot of people into play that maybe can't afford some of these larger schools.
Yeah. And, if you do end up settling in the Southeast for any reason, it does have an excellent reputation in the Southeast. I mean, if you run into Clemson grad, then there's going to be,
Sure, of course.
some shade thrown, I guess. But, I
Yeah.
think that can happen anywhere.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you said that, because the Southeast, it does have a very good. I would just say it's a growing national reputation. I'm seeing it move up the Mid-Atlantic, and starting to move coast to coast. And friends, I will tell you one reason why I feel South Carolina is hot. I've never shared this before on the podcast, but I'm really into studying population change and demographic trends. I mean, I've just been captivated and fascinated by this topic. I remember when I was like 8 and 9 years old, and I was studying like the largest cities and population migration, so I've just kind of been into it really my whole life. So the other day I was just doing some research on what are the fastest growing states. I actually looked this up quite a bit. I know, I'm nerdy. And in May 2024, South Carolina grew faster than any other state. And that's amazing, because if you look at the fastest growing states, you see Texas, you see Florida, you see North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Utah, you see Idaho, you see Colorado. It's basically all these states that are either in the West or the South. And this kind of goes back ever since air conditioning became really less expensive and really prevalent. So if you look back like before 1947, less than half the country had AC. But right now, 87% of the country had AC. So starting in the 50s and 60s, once AC was really prevalent, the South has been growing, and the South and West have been experiencing massive in-migration. The Northeast and the Midwest have been experiencing out-migration. And so it's something I think about a lot, because it impacts colleges' finances for the state. If you don't have the births growing or the migration to your state, it really impacts the colleges kind of in a major way. And so I think that's one of the reasons why South Carolina is just hot right now, is the growth that's occurring. And then another reason is they haven't had sort of the tempestuous political climate, at least from the governor. So I'll see a lot of students that will say, I'm not going to Texas and I'm not going to Florida. We see that a lot on our questionnaire. No Texas, no Florida. And sometimes they mention some other really deep red states as well, like Alabama can come up a lot, Arkansas. But they usually don't put South Carolina, even that South Carolina is a more conservative state politically than Texas or Florida. Just look at voting patterns. So I think that's another reason that South Carolina has had appeal, is it's managed to sort of stay out of that, sort of tempestuous political perception that can really turn off, people that tend to have strong views on politics. I didn't say much about their job placement and their career center, but I was impressed with that as well. So,
yeah,
Gamecocks. I can't believe I'm saying this, because, I had my own biases, because when I was at KIPP, we had very unpleasant experiences with the University of South Carolina, very unpleasant, to the point where we took it off our list. But what I had to come realize was that literally could have just been one person making a decision. And that was Because, I've talked with you even back, I got to know Lisa when she was going through this process with Lily.
Yeah, you were very discouraging.
I was.
Mark and I have had more than one argument about South Carolina in our day.
We have, but I would say that
he's seen the light.
I would say that I've come around to see things more like you do. I really have. Mm-hmm. I mean, part of my excitement is because my expectations were low. So I had like an epiphany. Mm-hmm. I really did. I was like, oh, I've like not done a good service to some people that I should have put this on their list. So I tried to assuage my guilt by hopefully doing a pretty positive spotlight.
Wow. It's hard. I mean, like if you do have a bad experience with something, that's just how the human mind works, right? You're like, that's all bad, but you don't know like what's one person or what's that particular period in time.
And the other thing that I would say is just being really transparent. Like, I think everybody probably has things that trigger them, and like I'm a Black male who's really well versed in Black history. And like, so I'm going to constantly see names of streets and things, and I'm going to know what that person did. And that was like, I had a hard time when I was on vacation at Edisto Beach because everything was Cotton this or Confederate this and all of that. And like the place it was 1% Black. It was an island of 414 people. How can South Carolina, which is the second largest Black population to Mississippi, be 1% Black? And given all that, so I'm like, I see like little things sometimes that can trigger me, just like anybody else that's probably had some experiences can trigger them. But I can't let my own biases like impact others. But honestly, it's not just about that. I really, really am impressed with the school, and I think that it has a lot to offer. And I think that I've also had enough conversations with Black families that have gone there that have been pleased with it as well. So, nothing is perfect, right? I always say to people, you eat the chicken and you spit out the bones, but you still eat the chicken. Unless you're a vegetarian like Lisa, then you don't eat it.
Yeah. Well,
that illustration doesn't work for her.
Well, but it is a very vivid metaphor.
Yes.
That,
doesn't apply to you, but you
point.
get it.
Yes, it's very... right there.
So Lisa, you can actually say you want to argue with me. You won me over to your side.
It's just one of many folks. But,
more to come.
Yeah, wait till I discuss, my visit to Furman with Sonia recently, because I know you've got opinions about that place too. So,
well, I mean, I see it's kind of the same. Like I see a lot of the great things about Furman, and also I tried to look at each individual too. So, for example, I've got a list roll out tonight with a really, really smart student. He went to Wake Forest and said, way too preppy. But I think Sonia's okay with pretty preppy because I see how she reacts to different campuses. And so I'm like, you know what I mean? That's okay, And believe it or not, I'm okay with kind of preppy too, but it's just I don't like some of the other stuff. But it's not about me. Like I try to look at how people react in different places. And so, it's a spectacular campus, Furman.
So,
yeah, awesome.
Well, but all right. Well, thanks so much for letting me have experienced a sweet thrill of victory. Thank you.
Enjoy it because it'll probably be at least 6 months before you get another one.
I know.
Maybe a year. It might be being generous.
I just have to
savor it. My ego can only take so much defeat. On Monday's episode, I'll have some special content for you, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. You got to tune in to see what it is. And then we'll have another segment of my interview with Jay Rosner, ACT and SAT guru. We hope you join us on Monday. And friends, I hope you never forget that college is not a prize to be won. College is a match to be made. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.